Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Cynthia Schneider. I teach diplomacy and culture here, and I'm very grateful to the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies and also the Mortara Center for sponsoring this event. And it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend Kahled Abol Naga, who many of you probably know as an incredible film actor and also director and producer. But this afternoon you will also be introduced to his many dimensions as an activist and a very dedicated actor in the ongoing Egyptian revolution. Go ahead.
Thank you, Cynthia. And thanks for everyone to show up today. I see some of the students who maybe were you in the class, Cynthia, yesterday? No? Because I talked to the Cynthia's class yesterday, and I have to tell you, nothing is I'm passionate about more than film, than talking to youth around the world. Because I believe there's a new age. We are entering a new age of humanity, where the power, and I'm quoting Ghunaim, a friend of mine, and of course you know him, a Google guy who was detained during the revolution, where the power of the people is actually just challenging, or even stronger in some areas of the world, the people in power. The power of the people is challenging, or even stronger now than the people in power. And that critical mass, that critical number of people who believe in that is changing, who have this belief, is just happening in many areas of the world. It's definitely during the Egyptian revolution, but also I think even here, right here in the States, even in Europe, the Occupy XXX is all about that. The nature of it all is that there's no number of people who have their rights taken away from them, or they feel injustice happening. Now they have the power to challenge the people in power. And it's not only about technology, it's not about Facebook and Twitter, I believe. I think it's much more than that. The technology is there and it helps, but, and I will talk about that in my talk, we have proof that even when technology is gone, it's still happening. There's something else in our consciousness that is changing, and I believe this is basically the essence of my new project, Tahrir al-Tahrir, Liberating Liberation, which I will take you on a tour and talk about it. But I will start with my film, my last film, which was shown in DC Film Fest's Arabian Sites Film Festival now in Washington, D.C. Did anybody see microphone? 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. They might have another screening, but if you don't know, Microphone is a film about the underground art scene, young Egyptians in the city of Alexandria. It started by Ahmed Abdallah, the director, interested to document something very interesting happening there, and it went on to something that we never even imagined in our wildest dreams. That basically was the sign of that new age, as I call it. The unifying Arab awakening, the collective consciousness that's happening, is also pretty much an aspect of what I'm sensing, and we're kind of trying to document in the new project. The new project is a documentary, but as Microphone, which started as a documentary, turned into a feature, we might end up doing that, so I don't want to lie and tell you it's a documentary. I'm not sure. We just start by feeling that we are passionate about something, we try to document it, meet people, and then things might change and it becomes more of a feature. But these features are definitely based on true stories, and sometimes, like Microphone, even played by the real characters. So that statement, and I'm borrowing it from my friend Ghunaim, who works for Google, and I love, he gave a TED talk about that, and there's another quote that pretty much says the same. It's by Khairi Abaza, who's a friend and a relative. Actually, he lives here in DC, and he's a political analyst. He says, there's no more someone who's like weak enough to let go of his rights, and there's no one strong enough to dictate others to live in a certain way or to take their rights away. And pretty much it's that sense. Pretty much it's one of the signs of that new age we're trying to document in Tahrir al-Tahrir. Or actually in two projects. One of them is Tahrir al-Tahrir. So I believe that we're getting into a new age. And in this new age, all our old school or old tactics, political or social, are going to be seeing quite a shake, let's say. And like what happened in Egypt when everybody thought this will never happen. Egyptians are very peaceful people, they will never revolt. It was a shock to everybody. Again, the reason that I am thinking this is happening is that we are entering that new age where the power of the people is challenging. This balance is changing now, the people in power. I'm going to take you first to the voices of youth, voices of Alexandria, which were my actually micro experience of how I ended up being in Tahrir Square started. It started with Microphone. Microphone, as I told you, is a film about underground artists. We saw graffitis like that in Alexandria, and we were very impressed because it's quite progressive. Usually in Egypt, we see writings on the wall. And there's a very famous people we know, they're known by name, but they're usually writings on the wall. Very interesting, funny sometimes, writings on the wall, but never art, graffiti. But then we found this and many others, and very progressive, and we thought, okay, who's behind it? And it took us to people behind it. Do you know a program called El Beit Beitak? Anybody is familiar with that? Can you raise your hand? Yeah? So that's graffiti making fun of this program. I don't know if you got the joke. El Beit Beitak. Watch at your own discretion. So, you know, it's funny, very political, it's a social message, and basically somebody's making fun of the name of a program which is supposedly in the state-owned TV and supposedly the prime-time talk show, but it's, you know, I don't know how to translate that joke, but so we went there. And the revolution started. Actually, we also had an interesting way of making this movie. We decided, a team of filmmakers in Egypt, I'm a co-producer as well, we decided to do it in a different way. We didn't want to do the film the classical way in Egypt. We wanted to do a film that proves also, had it been those kids in the film, making the film about themselves, they could have done it with these means. Meaning, we used the camera, for example, like this camera we're using. It's a photography camera, but the technology was just out in 2009, end of 2009, that these DSLR cameras, the photography cameras, have the function to shoot full high-definition video, which actually can be converted to 35 millimeter, which means it can be a film in theaters. And that was the first time that we have very affordable photography cameras. And the lenses that these cameras have are as good, sometimes even better, than the film cameras, very expensive film cameras the studios use in film production. So we thought, let's do the first it's called Canon 7D, the first Canon 7D entirely shot feature, also to prove that there is a revolution happening in cinema. There's been an evolution in Egypt. For those who don't know, there's been quite a history with filmmaking, and Egypt had a golden era with filmmaking at the same time when it was happening all over the world. Black and white classics now, which I think is a great idea for someone to pick it up and show maybe or tour of black and white golden era time Arabic speaking films maybe in Europe and the States. I think it's a great idea. And anyway, so we decided to make this film this way to prove that any student can do it. And we went there, we shot the film, got awards, came back, shot the film in towards the end of 2010. We went to Toronto, one of the big famous four important international film festivals, and the reasoning we tried to go to one of the big four and fought for it. Actually, I traveled all the way to Cannes to meet the director of the festival and give him a copy in his hand, make sure he watched it, because it's our way of getting away from the censors. The way to get away from censoring your films was to get it abroad first, get some awards, and then they feel awkward censoring it, or at least you bargain We got the first Arabic film festival I went to was in Tunis. And that's an eerie timeline. We got the best film award in the Carthage Film Festival. That's the first time ever an Egyptian film gets that, and that's because North Africa, the competition made it difficult throughout the years, although there was a lot of, I'm sure, good films. But anyway, we got the first award for this film in Tunis. I think 47 days, like a certain time period after the revolution in Tunis started. And it came to Egypt, and we got the best Arabic film award in Cairo Film Festival, almost 47 days, or the same number of days, I'm not sure what number of days, was 25th of Jan. And the premiere in Cairo was set, the slot we were able to get from the theaters was 25th of Jan. So I always joke about it and say, if you want a revolution here, maybe you should vote for it to get the best film award here. And maybe 47 days you might get a revolution. So it's very, very eerie timeline. So 25th of Jan is the premiere, and of course, we had no idea there will be a revolution. In my diary, in my calendar, I wrote protest, protest, protest. Mohammed Hifzi, my co-producers, had also protest, protest, protest. Ahmed Abdallah, who's actually a blogger and an activist himself, of course, had zillion protests he wanted to go to, but I ended up writing revolution. I was joking. I told Hifzi, wow, we can't have the film premiering that day. We have so many protests. And he said, protests are daytime. People just still go to the movies. Little did we know it was the first scheduled revolution in history, I guess. So before I go on, I want to, for those who didn't see the movie, I want to show you maybe a clip from the movie to tell you what is this underground movement talking about? What is the kind of content and subjects they're talking about? Is it? So I want to show you a clip from a hip hop band. And by the way, there's hip hop, mawel, rock, graffiti artists, you name it, all kinds of forms of arts. And this is very important to document in the film, that these kids didn't stop at a form. They didn't want to be the Egyptian folklore, or they didn't really get hung up on a form, and that I think is great, because we believe that artists and arts in general will never develop if you get hung up on that, and if you believe that the arts are human inheritance. It should be available to all humans, that you can here in the States use the Arabic culture, the Arabic arts, the instruments. In Europe, they should be able to use Chinese instruments and you name it. That's the only way that your art will develop and go somewhere else. If you go back in history, Ali Ismail, the great composer, was attacked almost because he decided to use any instrument to play Arabic music, which was only played back then in the Arabic takht, the anun and the very typical classical set. He changed that, and that was the gate that made Arabic music now everywhere, played in operas and So this is a very important aspect that these kids understood, and that was part of their movement. So anyway, so here's a hip-hop band. So when I say hip-hop, it doesn't mean that they were trying to be Americanized or Westernized. And they basically used it as a form because hip-hop is based on lyrics. This group is very political, very active politically. And this is a song from the film. It's called Project X. How can I dim the lights? Maggie's going to do that? Yeah.
Yes. يا مان مشروع سين تشيك 1 2 يا الكل واقف ضدي بس انا مش لوحدي الموضوع ده مش هيعدي اعتبره تحدي مش هنحل ودي الاسلوب ده مش هيفيدني هو ده اللي عندي واللي ما بيسمعش يسمعني ناس وناس خلاص مفيش احساس البني ادمين عندنا في مخهم في ترباس كل اللي حوالينا بيجروا وبيجروا بس احنا في دولتنا بنسحب مش بنهدوا مزيكتنا هتغيركم بس شويه منكم سياستنا حته منكم خليها بيني وبينكم وانا عارف مش عاجبكم الحقيقه بتزعلكم بس انا مش جاي انصحكم وافوقكم عشان انتوا مؤتمرات
حكومات تستغل الانسان بالقوانين مشروع سين مشروع التحمير لاجل التطوير
ديكتاتور
تحسينات أمنية لحماية مسؤولين الدولة دي، مظاهرات احتجاجية من فيها ساكن المساكن أغلبية، من فيها حاكم أقلية رأسمالية، مؤتمرات حكومات،
مشروع سين،
مشروع التحمير.
مشروع التحمير. Right, cool, baby. That's right.
Just to have an idea of what kind of issues, content of these bands talk about. So it's pretty political, pretty, you know, they're not censoring themselves. They feel that there's something wrong going on and they're talking about it. We had no idea there will be a revolution. Nobody can ever claim that. But looking back, yes, this film might be important because it was just a few days before that, in time, in general sense. It was almost a document of what was going on, what was the youth that pretty much started it all, were thinking or were feeling. As I said, the Tunis, Bouazizi burned himself, triggering the revolution in Tunis, the success in Tunis, or the euphoria of the possibility of change because of people uniting, inspiring people everywhere in Egypt. There was something fundamentally changing on the ground that nobody really understood till this moment, I believe, and I think it's very essential that we understand that before anything else, before toppling Mubarak or Ben Ali or the murder of Gaddafi, or it's more of ousting fear. Something happened to the people. Look at the pictures. This despair, there's a quote that says despair is the engine of hope. Well, despair here and the anger basically changed into energy and became revolt, and you can tell who's attacking who here and who's defending himself, although you're armed with all these, and that picture says a lot. This one too. There is something fundamentally that has changed. People ousted fear. Here's one entrance to Tahrir Square on the 28th of Jan morning, and how, you know, by the way, these guys praying are not really praying because it's not the right direction, it's not Mecca. So don't think, I mean, they use it as a tactic. So the protesters were really very creative in many ways. And the soldiers knew, and they knew somebody must be taking pictures, and they knew that there will be a great sympathy for, oh my God, they're praying and they're just using hoses. So don't get carried away and think that everybody was like, that protesters were always like naive and like, no, they also used tactics with the police. And this. That shocked everybody, including every single person in Tahrir himself. Nobody expected it. Nobody expected that the millions that went to the street will show up in a day with no cell phones, no internet, curfew most day hours, army planes and tanks. These are tanks. People are standing over it. And media blackout. CNN was not there, Al Jazeera barely hidden, maybe on top of one of those buildings, being harassed every day, and you know, nobody can even document that. Nobody were able to be in the middle of there. But these people made it. But the press was afraid. CNN was afraid. BBC was afraid. Al Jazeera was half afraid. But they had connections. So basically, what happened there needs to be studied for long. My intuition is, it must be something in the DNA. I mean, you can't think that a country like Egypt, with people basically inventing religion before prophets and making the idea of having command, even the 10 Commandments, the whole thing, and sorry about that, by the way, and then you know, not have something in their DNA or their, you know, genes really that tells them what to do at some moments like that. So I believe there's something there that made those Egyptians really rise up to the occasion, do something on the ground. Sorry about that. I wanted to, when you see a picture, it can sometimes fool you, but listening to the sound usually is very, very hard to be fooled. So I wanted to take you there. It's just a snippet, 10 seconds, to listen to what was the voice in Tahrir Square that day. So it's a bit loud, I'm sorry. I believe listening to it changes something, and that's what people chanted, الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام. Where did that come from? Even to me, even to everybody saying it, he felt like, I'm sure it was strange that slogan, but it came from Tunis, by the way. It was inspired from the Tunisians, and whoever came up with that, whom we don't know, actually, we researched that. We don't know who came up with that, but whoever came up with that really summarized and gave power all of a sudden in that sentence. People demand regime steps down. People demand regime steps down. And that's not literal translation, but in the context, that's the feeling. So people can demand, people can want, and the regime must be stepping down, should be stepping down. مبني للمجهول, فاعل مجهول, but it will. And that sentence was pretty much, a lot of young people who used it, when they heard it, for a moment, me too, I was like, what? What is, it's first of all classical Arabic, and at the same time, it felt good saying it. It felt very good saying it. Young kids, old men, all kinds of people in Egypt, Muslim, Coptic, no faith, educated, non-educated, rich, very poor. They were all saying it, and they felt good saying it. So there was something right in that. And it really, for the first time, pointed the finger to the head of the system, the whole regime, the Mubarak regime. And it didn't leave anyone to think different. Yes, the whole regime has to step down. The chaos question, of course, happened, and of course, the systems, the dictator systems usually have the chaos as an answer always to unity of people, and the chaos was there. There's a day, of course, that maybe you heard, you witnessed that on the 18 days that the Egyptian museum was endangered. And what happened was that a lot of young people made a human shield around it so that it protects it. And my brother is an architect, obviously, and he said that the real jewels and treasures were not only inside the Egyptian museum, were actually these kids protecting it. They felt that this is much more important than anything happening in the history right now. Amy Iskandar, she's actually an American U.S. She's American professor at the AUC. And she wrote very interesting. I met her in Tahrir Square, by the way. She was trying to take pictures with the tanks, and I was taking the picture for her. And it was very peaceful, I have to say. In the middle of Tahrir, in the middle of the epicenter, is very peaceful. And she wrote this article that the real force of stability in Egypt is its people, not the government. They released prisoners from the prisons to create chaos. They basically. Even now, it's been proven that they even set some buildings on fire to create chaos and to prove that the protests are going violent. And she wrote that, and it made a lot of sense. I felt that the country is being kidnapped, it's being hijacked by its own rulers, which shows what kind of people are in power. Actually, Egypt name, the country itself, although the United Nations have set the record straight a decade ago and used the right names as its own people call it. Guess what? The only country till today that its own people and it's in its region call it differently is Masr. Egypt is one of the names of the country, but it's Masr. Did you ever know that Egypt is not Egypt today? How many people know? Only the Egyptians, or from Iran or Turkey. What would that tell you? I was actually on the radio the other day and we were talking about that. What would that tell you about the kind of people in power for the past 50 years? The UN made a call for and changed the naming of countries according to how people call it, its own inhabitants today, the modern name or the current name, and still we use internationally or in the West they use the old name, the colonial name, which is one of our names, but the British kept it, Egypt. We're proud of Egypt, of course, the name, and Egyptus and Kemet, but now we have even an older name, Mizraim, Misr, and not one here probably would know that. But what would that tell you about whoever was in power? They didn't really care, did they? The name of your own country. What kind of people were in power for so many years and they didn't even talk about that, didn't even want to change that? So, Cynthia Schneider, my friend, and I have to tell you a small story about that later, but she said that sentence, quote, "The artists knew." When I met her first in Alexandria, we were shooting microphone, and there was some protests. I'll tell you about it later. And she said later, after the revolution, if you saw these kids and their lyrics and their songs, you would have known something is going to happen. So the artists knew. The politicians didn't. Obviously, Hillary Clinton didn't, and others. So yes. And that is actually a shot from a movie in actually 2007. This is Chaos by Yusuf Shaheen. But not only that, even in microphone. But what happened in Alexandria? Protests in Ismailia, Suez, Upper Egypt, even Sharm el-Sheikh. And people got really creative. We got 18 days to think about ideas of, getting this message across. So. And this is when I knew the revolution won. When people got really creative and got really funny. There's something very famous about Egyptians, I don't know if you know that, but the sense of humor. Egyptians usually have a joke every day about something, and it's usually propagating in the streets, in the cafes, and it's like everybody asks, so what's the joke today? And that kind of vanished in the past years with Mubarak regime, and life was really difficult, and people were really, if you look at them in the street in the morning, people were really not happy. And that sense of humor kind of disappeared. And it came back in those 18 days, everywhere. And that felt very healthy. The Egyptians are more back in control. They feel like they are more in control now. Of course, the media was chaotic. On the right, you can see the Egyptian television saying, oh, nothing, there's nobody. And it's actually a few meters away from the Maspero building where the TV and the radio is, the central in Cairo. And of course, on the left, Al Jazeera was live, getting the images from Tahrir with millions protesting. And it went on and on and on. Some heroes came to Tahrir, like this TV host, who basically protested with the protesters. But of course, we lost some. Back then, we thought it was only those. Now we know it's 2,000. 2,000, almost 2,000. 1,000 were lost. We didn't know where they are. We don't have an account even of their bodies. And 1,000 that we have an account of their bodies and we know where they are. But at least in the range of 2,000 that we lost them completely. These youth, and I think are one of the best youth that you can ever find, because they were brave, they were intelligent, and they were students, university students mostly. Like a lot of students here in this university, probably the same age, were gone. Gone. They will never see free Egypt. But you can. You can witness a free Egypt and a free Arab world and a free part of human society right now. You can. And you should. And you could. And I hope at the end of this talk that you would. And I'll tell you why and how. Sponsors, yes, we had some sponsors. Unfortunately, the West governments were not one of them. I wish they were. They lost the chance. I hope they don't lose the chance that is open now, and I'll tell you about it later. Facebook and Twitter, of course, and Al Jazeera. This is Al Jazeera there. And that is Eid al-Shorta, the day of the police, because it has historically has a meaning to protest on the 25th of Jan. And at the end is the timing. The timing. People had a sense that this is the right time. This is the right time to change. It's almost like all those lines. I always say that the 25th of Jan is like a lens where all those lines, all kinds of people, all met in this dot where all the lines converged into to draw another image at the back, but it's upside down. Upside down meaning the power of the people now is on top, and the people in power are actually at the bottom. It just switched that balance. So Facebook, Twitter, Al Jazeera, Eid al-Shorta, the police day, and the time. It says here, صبرنا سنوات فلم يبقى إلا ساعات. So there was a real sense that this is it. This is the right time. This is the time we should do something about it. And that is interesting. And that is very interesting to me as a filmmaker and also in any study. What is it that made everybody think this is the time? I'll take you a quick tour of images because really having a feeling of the sense of humor of Egyptians in Tahrir in these 18 days says a lot. Please leave, my hands are aching. People found any piece of cardboard and wrote what they wanted to write, and that was amazing. They really got creative with whatever they find. Even the rocks that was thrown at them by thugs, they made of it writings on the floor, on the streets, so that the helicopters there from the army relaying what's going on can read it. Even a recycling site where you can recycle your slogan so that people coming to Tahrir Square can actually take another word, so you don't lose that. You can keep whatever you wanted to say. Maybe someone else like it and take it and put it up. It was friendly. Kids can actually play, yeah. And of course, very sarcastic. Bewitched, yeah, I can't translate that too, but it's Tiranta. And a lot of protesters were very creative on how to make sure that the army won't move their vehicles and their tanks because they were afraid. We didn't know what the army. Yes, of course, we led the tanks into Tahrir Square, and the reason or the argument was, okay, we'll let you in, but on one condition: we're going to write on each and every tank, الشعب والجيش إيد واحدة. And the reason that slogan came, I was in these negotiations. You can't believe it. We had to come up with something, and we have to paint it on each and every tank. And it said الشعب والجيش, and something that says that you are with us, you're not against us. So it said there was not enough space. So إيد واحدة was the only thing that whoever wrote it came up with. So الشعب والجيش إيد واحدة came up that day with on 28th of Jan with these tanks getting in, and the negotiation was, okay, but we have to write something on each tank so that you're with us. And of course, some people got carried away, and you've seen the beep Mubarak, slogan. And it started inspiring the world. I mean, you've lived that. What Lady Gaga said about those hats and protection, what did she say? The brilliant bastards. She said something like that. But what happened in Egypt also inspired Syria, and of course the Egyptians inspired by Tunis, and in Yemen, and Algeria, and Libya, and Bahrain. And where's that? Do you know where that is? Well, definitely an Arab country. Let's say Arab. And where's that? This is a Syrian flag. It's not Syria. This is in the middle of Tahrir Square on 8th of April, because that day there was a lot of Syrians, unfortunately, were killed in a peaceful protest there. So there was a support, there was solidarity. So there is something going on. A collective Arab consciousness, let's say, that most politicians, Arab or not, dismiss it. What are they afraid of? Why are they afraid of this collective Arab consciousness? Tunis inspiring Egypt, inspiring Libya and Syria, and the support of people. Faisal Liafi says in his article that the lessons taken by the leaders in the Arab world is completely opposite to what it should be. They completely dismiss that it's a political uprising. They completely dismiss that there is unity. On the other hand, I believe in this new age, and I believe there's nothing stronger than this message that tells you that these people are one. Mubarak said Egypt is not Tunis before the revolution in Egypt. Bashar al-Assad said, oh, after the revolution in Egypt, he said, oh, Syria is not Egypt or Tunis. Gaddafi said, oh, Libya is not Tunis or Egypt or Syria. Guess what? Egypt is Tunis, is Libya, is Syria, is the whole, there's a whole Arab consciousness that is very strong, that tells you that these people have the same aspirations and they feel they have the same problems and they belong to each other. I call it a united Arab awakening. Again, a lot of studies have to be done here. I can't stress enough that it's totally understudied, and will take a long time, I think, to find out what exactly is going there, because we live so much under the old, what I call system right now, which tells us about politics and parties and how things happen, but things are happening differently from now on. There's a new age, and this new age has its own different politics, or people who change things and push things ahead. Whatever happens in Palestine or Lebanon, or invasion of Kuwait, or the invasion of Iraq, or division of Sudan, is touched and felt in all these countries. So there is a united Arab consciousness, even if everybody dismisses it. Did it ever happen before? Yes, right here. Whenever I'm giving this talk in a country, I look in the history of this country and I go back to see what happened. The civil rights movement right here, if you go back, and I watched a brilliant documentary, the mixed tape, I think that's part of the title, and they found these video interviews with a lot of the activists back then, and they say exactly almost the same words, the same basic human rights they're fighting for. It's the same thing. So this is not a revolution that is, yes, of course, led by a politician or a political party. It's a revolution for basic human rights. It's like the French Revolution. It's like the basic, big, major revolutions that now is part of the human inheritance. It's part of our psyche. It's the part of our being here today. The Constitution of the United States was affected by it because it happened back in the history. This is exactly, again, happening. And this is where my new movie, my new documentary is about. I can take you in a, but I'm just for the time, I'm just going to skip this part, which is who, but you know Ghunaim, how he was detained, he was now on Google, but Zenobia also is very important, and the Libya Revolution guy, and many, but is it leaderless? And that's a question that Cynthia Schneider and a lot of people ask me, where are the leaders? We need leaders, you need leaders to go on. No. Oh yes, if you want. Okay. But that's the leader. He doesn't have a nose and two eyes and a mouth. It's a multitude. And that's the new age. You can have a leader who's a multitude, not one person. This is the connected social networking. This is a graph that looks that basically represents that, and each bubble is how many tweets coming from that Twitter or message coming out. In red is Arabic, blue is English, and in between is both languages. So, is it leaderless? Of course not. Yes, of course there is a leader, but it's not a person, and that's a sign of the new age I'm talking about. It's not a person. Yes, there is some persons that we believe they are great, they moved and shake things like Dr. Baradei, but really, it's led by the people. For the first time now, we have a revolution that's led by the multitude. And is that good or bad? Maybe that's a question to be studied. I believe it's excellent. I believe it's the evolution of politics. You can call it a revolution, but yes, maybe it happened through revolutions now. It's happening as we speak through revolutions, but it is the evolution of politics. I don't believe we'll see politicians in the future. I believe the new age will have multitudes deciding on everything. And we have the technology. If you had in every cell phone an application today for people to vote about issues, it will happen. If you vote in the Arab world today, now, about a unity in the Arab world, you'll get a unanimous yes. Who believes I'm right? Raise your hand. Only Egyptians and Arabs. And we have the technology. And we do have the technology. That's the new age we're entering. That's me, by the way. I was tweeting Cynthia Schneider on a very crucial day, and I usually don't say this in the talk, but maybe it's an interesting story that I might like to share with you since you're sitting here. On one night, the 29th, I felt probably like I don't remember the date exactly now, but we can find it on Twitter. This night we had no one, not one live TV channel on Tahrir Square at night. And I felt something is not right. There's not even one camera there. Even Al Jazeera camera was taken away that night, and I felt really scared for the people in the square. I was back home because I had a horrible cold and I had to stay in bed for 3 days. And that night, I was tweeting everybody, right, left, north, south, about I felt something wrong might go on. And one of the people I was in touch with was Cynthia Schneider. I said, can you just relay this message? I feel something wrong might happen tonight. There's something scary. There's no one covering what's going on. There's no cameras there for the first time, and I don't feel good. And I actually lied. I created a lie on Twitter Space that there are NGOs giving out infrared cameras everywhere, and we have like hundreds and thousands of them everywhere, to scare anybody who might think that maybe it's the time to crush Tahrir Square and become another Tiananmen Square. And that was there in the air. We felt that it could be a plan. And I think later Cynthia Schneider came back to me and after everything, and she said, I got a message from the State Department saying thank you very much for actually getting these voices in time. Apparently, there was no one else connecting these voices, which is scary, having the biggest embassies in the Middle East and not getting such messages. Corruption is not only in Egypt, maybe. Anyway, we move from here to why did it happen and the premiere on the 25th of Jan. So back again to the premiere on the 25th of Jan, and as I said, my whole crew couldn't make it. My director couldn't make it to the premiere because of the demonstrations. He said, get the camera, get down here to Tahrir right now. You need to know what, you need to see this and hopefully shoot it. And that's what happened. That's my new project started that day on the premiere, 25th of Jan. We started shooting what's going on. And basically there was a lot of protests trying to get into Tahrir Square, protesters, and they couldn't. It was completely blocked by massive numbers of police forces. And this is where it all started, and this is where my new project started, and this is actually how it happened. But I wanted to stop here. This is a 7-minute long video that I actually was able to shoot that night and put online, and then that was on the 25th of Jan. By the time I put it online, Egypt was taken away from the grid on the internet worldwide. So that was the last, probably one of the last videos that was ever posted before we come back online. Feels funny saying that we came back online. Somebody pulled the plug. So I'm gonna play little bits and pieces of it, not all of it, because I think we don't have all the time for it. I'm going to roll through the end time constraint, so.
كلاب والله والله كلاب والله كلاب والله يسحفوا حد
It's very bad for my government. I haven't food, I haven't anything. Me and my children, I will die today.
Why? There's many seeds to that day, but we're still going to have to do a lot of research to know why. But one of them is this face, Khaled Said, whom while we were shooting in microphone in Alexandria, he actually came to the set. He knows some of the kids who are in the music bands. And later he was brutally murdered by the police, and actually incorporated the story in the film. And we woke up one day in Alexandria, we're finding a lot of protests around us, and we found out that this boy was killed, this kid was killed by the police because he refused to be interrogated, and that's a common practice in Alexandria, part of showing how the regime or the police is in power and they can do whatever they want. And basically they said, oh, he had a bag of narcotics and he choked on it. But then his mother and his sister went to get the body, and they found this. Obviously, he didn't choke on a bag of narcotics. And the trial was in courts only a few days ago, after so many months. They finally proved that he was killed by being beaten to death. And he got the minimum, unfortunately, sentence, which is 7 years in the Egyptian law. That was one of the seeds. He's gone. He's not going to see free Egypt, but he definitely was the seed for it. He stood up. You will never see free Egypt, but you will. And you could. And you should. I'm going to take you back to Tahrir because I need to hear your voices. But at this day, these kids lost their voices because they were actually protesting throughout the day, and they lost their voices. It was a very long day, and the tear gas. If you stay in an area with a lot of tear gas in the air, actually one of the consequences is that you truly lose your voice. There was a lot of sign language going on. On the 28th of Jan, these kids entered Tahrir Square. They conquered Tahrir Square, then they entered, but there was very few of them, and it was very, very tiring, long 48 hours. But they still had a sound, the sounds and sights of Tahrir, I call it. And if I wrote this in a script, you tell me I'm overdoing it. So what did these kids do when they lost their voices? If I wrote this in a script, people would think I'm over-dramatic. And they basically used the canisters of the tear gas from the street, the rocks, and basically just made this rhythm, which showed how angry still they are, the sounds of rage. Sights and sounds of repression, oppression, social injustice, corruption, denied voting, torture. Sights and sounds calling for freedom, equality, democracy, social justice, civil, modern, free Egypt. These are the sights and sounds of those who started this revolution and gave the voice, the youth voice, to the people, power to the people, basically gave power to the people that is challenging or more stronger than the people in power. And again, putting this in context of an Arab awakening, unifying Arab awakening, is basically the headline of what we're working on right now, and why I'm here, really. Because I believe if you, as human beings, anywhere in the world, believe in these basic human rights, and I'm sure you do, you are all invited right now, at this moment, to be Egyptian protesters. I'm here to recruit you all to be Egyptian protesters. I know it's in your DNA. Microphone, these kids in Tahrir decided to do something very interesting. Some of them, not all of them, part of them were in this in Tahrir that day, and they decided to make a song about the protests. And I think it's a great way to end my talk and at the same time open questions and answers. So please enjoy this clip that was shot in Tahrir Square using little mobile phones, and basically they did it on their own, spontaneously, with everybody in the square.
نزلت وقلت انا مش راجع، وكتبت بدمي في كل شارع، سمعنا اللي ما كانش سامع، واتكسرت كل الموانع، سلاحنا كان احلامنا، وبكره واضح قدامنا، من زمان بنستنى، بندور مش لاقيين مكاننا، في كل شارع في بلادي صوت الحرية بينادي، في كل شارع في بلادي صوت الحرية بينادي.
رفعنا راسنا في السماء، والجوع ما بقاش بيهمنا، اهم حاجة حقنا، ونكتب تاريخنا بدمنا، لو كنت واحد مننا بلاش ترغي وتقول لنا نمشي ونسيب حلمنا، وبطل تقول كلمة أنا.
في كل شارع في بلادي صوت الحرية بينادي، في كل شارع في بلادي صوت الحرية بينادي.
أيادي مصرية سمرة ليها في التمييز، ممدودة وسط الزئير بتكسر البراويز، طلع الشباب البديع قلبوا خريفها ربيع، وحققوا المعجزة صحوا القتيل من القتل. اقتلني قتلي ما هيعيد دولتك تاني، بكتب بدمي حياة تانية لأوطاني، دمي ده ولا الربيع الاتنين بلون أخضر، وببتسم من سعادتي ولا أحزاني.
في كل شارع في بلادي صوت الحرية بينادي، في كل شارع في بلادي صوت الحرية بينادي، في كل شارع في بلادي صوت الحرية بينادي، في كل شارع في بلادي
notes. Yesterday in Cynthia Schneider's class, a girl, one of the students asked me, isn't this United Arab thing is what Osama bin Laden wanted? And I'm so glad that she asked that question, because I'm sure it was in the minds of a lot of young American students who don't have this confusion. And it really shocked me to have that question in the middle, and I thought about it, and I gave her the answer later, saying, I thought about it a little bit. If there is anything that will be perfect in deterring that extremism that Osama bin Laden and all these extremist groups were trying to do, is basically supporting this. Supporting people's aspiration for freedom, deciding their future. If there's anything that the US can do or the West can do to really not have any more of such extremism, is basically have this, is basically support this. And I think there was an interesting question to come. I'm available now for Q&A, but before that I have to tell you what I really came to tell you. We have a government right now in Egypt, people in power, that think that they can bluff the world. Al-Majlis Al-Askari, SCAF, military in power right now in Egypt, are even worse than a Nazi government. They have just detained bloggers because they criticized the army. They military trialed a lot of peaceful protesters, and lately they even basically stopped talk shows that criticized the army. Yusri Foda, a great Al Jazeera TV host, has his program, stopped it. He had to draw the line and made a press conference about that. Bilal Fadl, a great voice of the revolution, a journalist, also got his column every day now coming out in the newspaper, white, with nothing in it, with one sentence saying, I protest my words to be censored by the military in power. Same thing with Ibrahim Isa. All these big names that people believe and trust, and they're really voices of the revolution, are now not being able to do that. And they think they can get away with it. Actually, Hillary Clinton said she thinks that SCAF is going to schedule, and she's very happy with their performance. Later, a Friday later, protesters were hanging a big banner saying, where is that schedule? Can you send it to me? Can you email it to me? And there's an email on the board. You have to know, and you must know, that this will never happen. This is your revolution. This is a revolution that will change the world and must change the world to the better. I have no doubt the military in power now will never go on with this plan. It will never work. But I want you to know that. And everybody has to know that, because the media, the blackout we have right now in the media from the official media in Egypt, is trying to get this not reach you. But I'm very optimistic. I'm very hopeful, and I know it will never happen, because those who did this revolution will never let go of that. But you had to know. Thank you. So if you have any questions, I'm yours. Please.
Okay, just on your last comment, so the battle is not over. I mean, the counter-revolutionary forces are trying all kinds of dirty tactics, and so on. The thugs, the Batavia, the lack of police, all that. So what are people doing about it? I mean, you form militia, people of the militia of the people. How do you stop these violent kind of anti-revolutionary tactics?
Well, do you know, in a revolution, usually you have a board that basically sits there and decides on these things. You're going to ask me, where is that board in your new age revolution? You don't have leaders. Well, it exists. I know where it is. And you saw how it looks like. It's there. And if you are a member, and you can be, you basically create using an email and password a membership, and you can be there. And if you know a little bit of how to use these social networking platforms, you can actually also eliminate those special security and whoever are trying to confuse you with a lot of confusing messages and lies sometimes. But these conversations are happening as we speak. Kahled Abol Naga, a blogger who was detained, someone came up on the Twitter sphere with a genius idea saying that when you are in front of the military trial, just stand up and say, you cannot try me because I'm civilian and you're a military side, and let's see where it goes. And some genius lawyer decided that that might even dismiss all the 24,000 people that have been tried by the military courts. Most of them, some of them people I know, I was chanting next to them in the protests. So there is Majlis Qiyat al-Thawra or board, and these conversations happen in this sphere. So I invite you to be part of this and talk with them. Your input can be sometimes critical, and it can actually save lives. So I'm not the one to answer it. I'm just pointing you to where it is. And I would definitely recommend anybody who wants to do any kind of political studies to be a member of the Twitter sphere, especially Twitter, maybe Facebook as well. But also you have to know where it is in the sphere and how to basically firewall all the, the infiltrations from the Amn al-Dawla and the security forces, because they are there. But so easily to find out. I mean, with little logic, you find out somebody tweeting always and about one issue or two, always in one direction. You definitely know what they're trying to do or confuse people with messages. So this is where it's happening. These conversations are happening, and I'm telling you, Kahled Abol Naga. Someone came up with this genius idea on the Twitter sphere, and he did it. And now I think something might come out from that. So it's gonna. I believe the Egyptians are very peaceful, and you know that they're not gonna. But not for long. It might not be for long. And I believe if it happened, might be we go back to the Romanian style. But I believe this is. I don't know if it's going to happen. But what I know for sure that the Egyptian people are peaceful, and they're going to use these conversations until we get rid of the SCAF. So. It's over for the SCAF. We all know that. Actually, my hunch is they know that, and they actually are having an exit. We heard about a law they are trying to pass now to keep the military out of questions and give them privileges and get out. So, which is crazy. They should have tried to do that 6 months ago. Now it's too late. Again, like Mubarak, always too late. So I don't believe they have a chance. But you had to know, and you had to stay tuned to what's going on. But not to discourage you, actually to encourage you. Because this is a time where everybody in the international community has to press and basically point the finger where it should be. And obviously also correct some of your politicians' statements. Please.
I'm Kurdish Shari, speaking on behalf of all Jerushan, and saying that we're honored to have you on campus. My question pertains more toward, you mentioned...
Do you mind introducing yourself? It's nice.
Sorry, my name is Waddell. I'm a student here in Georgetown. You mentioned sort of classical films and movies and stuff like that. And I think for anyone who grew up in the Middle East or in the Arab world, we grew up watching great movies, great Egyptian movies by Yusuf Shaheen and the likes, about sort of the corruption and the oppression that was going on in Egypt and the Arab world. But I haven't seen other artists, sort of speaking up. Where's Adil Imam, who produced amazing movies? Movies that were political by all means. Where are they?
My answer is don't ask that question. Actually, ask the opposite question, which is don't ask where is Adil Imam, but ask where is those who are speaking with the revolution, and there are many. Most of them are not known as Adil Imam, but have no doubt they will be. They will be. Please.
Hi, my name is Liz. I'm a student here at Georgetown as well. I'm very curious about your interaction with the Mubarak regime as an artist, because I think that it's very important. Because you talk about underground art and you talk about regime, it seems that those two don't communicate. So I was wondering how did you interact with the state? Did the state try to co-opt you in some way, as opposed to right now, which you're more free to talk?
I was, interesting question, thank you. I was doing interviews with Voice of America and Al Hora TV here, among other channels, and I was really surprised by a remark told to me by my my interviewers from Al Hora and Voice of America, that they're going to have a hard time editing it. And I was like, why? I said, oh, you're very critical of Hillary Clinton and some statements that came out of... I said, well, aren't you? I said, yeah, but you know, it's Voice of America and Al Hora TV. And I thought that was very strange here in the States. So the same kind of thing actually happened, which made me think twice about freedom of expression everywhere at this time on this planet right now. This is what happened to me, basically. Yes, I've been, as a TV host in my talk shows, yes, I got that thing, but I was doing a lot of arts, more arts and less politics. But sooner or later, if you're an honest artist, I believe that your art will always, always be political. Has to touch microphone, although it's about music and bands and arts and graffitis. It was very political, not only because of that song that you heard, that was the most political thing in the film, by the way, but because of the whole honesty in portraying a reality. So yes, of course, they bashed and they had campaigns against people like who were vocal against the government, and I had my share, trust me. And Dr. Barade had a big share, and all of us. But you have to go on. Please.
Zarina Shakira from Pacifica Network, and thank you again for being on our radio show.
Thank you.
Yesterday. I would just like to say that, you know, it's interesting you bring up Voice of America. It does not broadcast in the United States. It's for other countries to represent the United States. And what it's going to represent is a position that the people, let's say, that are in New York, in Oakland, in San Francisco, Occupy, all over the United States, these people are being arrested, the same as people were arrested in some of the moves in Egypt, Tunisia, and other places. And so, you know, this is a real world, and America does not have a democracy. This is a republic. And if people ever can really read the Constitution and what that's all about, then they would understand that this is happening here too. I wanted to say, because I do want to ask a question. America has the most prisoners in the world here, 3 million. I want to ask you, Khaled, what did you think of the vote yesterday in the UN with UNESCO?
For Palestine to be a full member?
Yes, because I've been to Palestine and I've been to Egypt, so what did you think?
Well, again, I'm going to voice more of what was happening on the Majlis Khat al-Thawra, the Twitter sphere, which I really is always my space to go and understand what's going on and how people are reacting. It was well taken, and also it's a sign that that now it's very hard to keep going the same way you were going before. I believe that the Palestinians have rights that's been taken away from them for long, and that's the core of the conflict, and this is how you have to address it, and I think it's about time now that Palestinians have their own state. Actually, they do have a state. It's just us or people sitting somewhere saying you don't have a state. A state exists by its own people and culture. They have people and they have culture. They just don't have part of their land. Please.
My name is Raphael Frankel. I'm a PhD candidate here, and I also do freelance journalism in the Middle East. My question is basically putting aside the support that the U.S. gave to the Mubarak regime for 3 decades. What would you like to see the U.S. do now, right now? And you said pressure. Pressure is a very general term. I mean, what would you really like to see the U.S. do?
Nothing. that question was asked on that question was asked. No, I'll elaborate. It's not, of course. I thank you for the question. Actually, it shows that you really want to see what really can you do, and you want to do something. Hopefully, so yes. That question was asked, it was like 5 a.m. on Al Jazeera that finally kept the cameras on, and they were interviewing people from the Tahrir Square, and the same question was asked, what do you think the West should do? What is the steps? Give us like 1, 2, 3 maybe concrete things that can be done. And a protester said that, he's a doctor actually, and he said, nothing. But stay tuned. And I believe when you say US, again, you were falling into the trap. You mean the US people or you mean the US government? Because without that separation, you would go mad in the Middle East. Just think about the Palestinians not making that separation. And by the way, Osama bin Laden, he did what he's doing because he didn't make that separation. Because he dealt with the US citizens as the US government as one. But we all have to make that separation. A government is a government and people are people. And you cannot mix those two together. And if you're talking about the US government, what it should do, well, at least when they talk about SCAF, whatever, they should be more informed and more understanding of how that's going to be taken by the people who made such a dramatic revolution. That's my suggestion.
Let me just clarify just real quick, because I mean, at the moment, the U.S. is still supporting the military, financially, militarily, training-wise. I mean, do you want that? Would you like that stopped? Does that mean nothing? Yes. Okay, because that's a concrete step that I'm asking you. When I say the U.S., I do mean the U.S. government.
Well, this is more detailed. Okay, if you want to go details, let's talk about the U.S. aid. The U.S. aid to Israel has completely different, and we have a lot of political analysts who would maybe validate what I'm saying. A lot of different regulations and rules to the U.S. aid to Egypt, and Washington Post lately had a very interesting article of what's going on with that. And I think if that was made mainstream, and this is probably also one of the reasons why the military in Egypt now is very nervous, because the information about that their salaries is coming from US aid. Can you believe generals in an army of a country getting their salaries from another country? If that information was made mainstream to Egyptians, I think that would be the end of any kind of credibility of the generals. I'm talking, of course, about SCAF, the leadership. Again, I mean, yes, there's a lot of things like that can happen. But really nothing. What you should do is stay tuned to what's going on and just be informed. Please, yes. I'm sorry. Didn't know what was going on.
Hi, I'm Neda. I'm a student here. I'm really interested in what you have to say about the Arab consciousness or Arab awakening that the Arab world is experiencing. But I mean, my only concern is that it's not like this is the first time that we saw during the Iraq War, during the Palestinian Intifada. There's always been like this Arab consciousness. So I guess my question is, why do you think that this is a different one, and that one that wouldn't die, after a period of time? And what role can artists like yourself play in making sure that this Arab consciousness doesn't die? Because I guess obviously you're playing a role, but I don't, just like what Doc said, I don't see how other people are. And it seems, maybe because we live so far away, but I don't see a lot of movies, songs, poems, there's so many things that artists can do, but it's just not visible. So how do you think that artists like yourself around the Arab world can...
Okay, good question. Two points. First of all, you never, it's an old school to do art with a message. It's a very old school, even older than the age we're living in now. What you do is you do art that is honest and trying to be reflecting what's going on, what's happening, and no matter what, without even you as an artist being aware, you will actually reflect much more about what people's aspirations is. But going to your main point, which is why is this different than any other? Because there's a simple fact about, even in drama, which is if you want something to flourish, try to stop it without killing it. try to stop it without completely killing it. And this is what the politicians were making in the Arab world. They try to dismiss an Arab unity and dismiss an Arab united consciousness, but they can't kill it. I mean, how can you kill that? This is what people feel and belong to, and this is what they really. I mean, you can't kill that. This is like your sense of belonging. So by having so many politicians like Mubarak and Ben Ali and all of them, and I believe Mubarak was a key figure in that, because he had that kind of dismissing any kind of unity in the Arab world, and feeling and making people feeling more frustrated and less hopeful about that. Actually, by doing that, it makes people much more insisting that it happens. And I believe there's nothing much stronger than the streets in Tunis inspiring the streets in Cairo and in Egypt, and then inspiring Libya and Syria and all the Arab world. That tells you, and this is the strongest statement in recent history, definitely, hands down, has to be studied. I believe a place like this has to study it carefully. Something very, very important is happening, and a lot of people are missing it, especially politicians. This is the strongest message that you can ever study in the recent history, that the media was against it, politicians were against it, heads of states were against it, or dismissing it, I mean, and then it still happened. Mubarak said, Egypt is not Tunis. Bashar, oh, Syria is not Tunis or Egypt. Gaddafi, oh, we're not Tunis or Egypt or Syria. Guess what? The people are saying, no, Egypt is Tunis, is Syria, is Libya. This is one world, one people, have the same aspirations, and you're just dismissing something we can actually change that and say that in a much stronger way. There is nothing, مفيش أبلغ من اللي حصل ده يأكد إن الناس دي one is one. Thank you. Please.
My name is Ahmed Hayta. I'm a student at Georgetown. I'm very interested in your theory about how politics is evolving so that it's going to be governed by multitude. So, just hypothetically speaking, what do you think the attitude of this multitude is going to be to say something like the parliamentary elections coming up in November? How are they going to deal with that? How are they going to run for it?
Remember the referendum voting? Do you remember the referendum voting in Egypt? And a lot of people, a lot of politicians knew the trick. It was like, oh my God, now everybody was going to say, yes, we changed those six points in the constitution, and that means we're going to go into elections fast, and we were not ready to have the political parties ready with the young people. And they made TV commercials saying, say no to the people. I knew people would say yes, because after a revolution like this, everybody thinks for his own. The multitude, again, back to the multitude, what would you do? You have two roads to go. One says 6 points to be changed in the constitution, and we go ahead with that, or nothing changed, and then we basically we'll see what we do later, which is quite an interesting way to vote. But anyway, that was the thing. That was how the SCAF wanted to go ahead with it. And I knew people would say yes. In my blog, go back, you'll find my blog saying people will say yes. Although I wanted to say no. I knew why the politicians wanted to say no, because they wanted to gain the time. But all this is beyond. The multitude would definitely say, let's change something, but instead of nothing. And that's, to me, common logic. So the multitude will always think on its own. It's like a mind on its own. And I knew it. I felt it. It's a consciousness that I know it's there. And you have to be in touch with it. But also you have to learn that in that age I'm talking about, I believe that the multitude will always go in the right direction, in the positive direction for the whole. Because scientifically, if you ask many people about one subject, the extremes will cancel, and you'll end up with a bulk which definitely is going to go in the right direction. And I believe this is the core, this is the essence of the new age, where the multitude will definitely, if it's of course well informed and not being, the votes are not being rigged and so on, of course you'll go in the right direction. And that's basically what I'm hoping is, and this is what I'm trying to sense. It's a new age. We're all just reading the signs of it. But what happened is definitely not at all abiding by any kind of other revolutions we've seen before, other ways that countries changed before. It is a new age, definitely, where, as I said, the signs we're reading, one of the signs I love, the quote, that the people, the power of the people is now just challenging the people in power. So I don't know. The answer is I don't know, but I will definitely sense it, and I can tell you the answer from sensing these Twitter spheres and people talking and this general consciousness that comes up. Right now, the election is coming. A lot of people are not even focusing on it, which tells you that the multitude consciousness is more concentrating on what the SCAF is doing. You know, the freedom of speech, the basic rights, and they believe that, you know what, the whole elections with the Supreme, you know that of course there's a Supreme Court ruling now that the Egyptians living abroad has to vote, and if they don't do that, actually they can dismiss the whole elections later if somebody raised that in court, and that's another reason I think why the multitude or the consciousness of the people is like, we're not focusing on the elections, it's focusing on something else, the basic rights. Yes, please. We have a couple of questions. Okay, please.
Catholic, and I was little before there was even colleges. Doesn't it come down to economics that Egypt is a resource-limited country with a huge population, and the ones who take power are those who want to distribute the wealth most fairly and justly, and the only group available today willing to do that is the Muslim Brotherhood. And the tendency will be to bring that into power, which, from my perspective, would probably be the most preferred thing.
Okay. Another question? Yes, please. Yes.
Hello, my name is Yomna Sarhan, and I'm in my second year undergraduate SFS. And I met Wet William last spring, and I got to meet him and talk with him. And I've been to so many like revolutionary events on campus. But the thing is, I'm an Egyptian living abroad, and I can speak for most Egyptians living in the U.S. What can we do? I was in Egypt this summer. I attend so many sessions like this, but I feel so helpless. Like I just want to know how I can impact things in Egypt. What can I do? Because it's not a good feeling.
Okay. Please.
Hi, my name is Meg Gabriel. I've met before many times in Egypt.
Yeah.
Of course, you will not remember me, but
No, I remember the face.
Yeah. January 20th. My question is about the situation now. I feel that the clash between the army and people, the real clash, is coming soon, whether we choose it or not. That's like, it will happen.
Inevitable.
And what I'm concerned about now is preparing an alternative. How can we find a mechanism to have a civil council, civil presidency council, or whatever the shape. So I want to have your perspective on this mechanism.
Can I answer these before I forget quickly? I'm very short. I believe, I'm going to start with that question. I believe this is happening inevitably, but again, from what I hear from the conversations of a lot of activists and young people is we're heading there without even thinking, without even having to plan it, to what we call a general civil disobedience. If you think about it, even in the police now, that they're actually protesting against Aisawi, the Minister of Interior, and that is something. Every establishment in Egypt that was corrupt or being now in the same direction of being corrupt is being now revoluted against. There's an inside revolution, even in the newspapers and TV stations and factories. So there is a general feeling that now we can win. Now if we all protest and demand what we have, what we feel is right, it will change because of the hope of, because of ousting Mubarak as an example. So that's happening, and I believe that we're probably heading to a complete civil disobedience until the SCAF leaves power. That's what probably we're heading there. So my answer, yes, and I'm not sure what to do, but I believe, yeah.
Because among the political activists, we are asking ourselves the same question every day.
Yeah, but I believe, and answering your question, what to do is to stay informed, to stay tuned, and be prepared, because I think the answer next time, there's not going to be millions in the streets like every time, because you know what? It's frustrating. You can't go on every Friday for 9 months and you know, asking millions to go down again, another million people in the street asking for one tick on 8 or 9 demands we asked in 25th of Jan. So it's becoming ridiculous, of course, and I think now people decided to go in their own local areas, like in the factories, in the post establishment, inside the TV building, and they do their own little revolutions there, which I believe might end up with a complete civil disobedience and basically force SCAF to leave. Eventually, many scenarios might come up, but as far as I know, is staying tuned and staying informed, especially everywhere. And I believe this revolution should not be only for Egyptians. This is a revolution that, like the French Revolution, like the major revolutions, like the civil rights movements here, has to go and propagate and become a worldwide quest for freedom, social justice, end of corruption. And this is the only way that even, let's say, the worst scenario, that the SCAF does the elections, puts the law that they are not to be questioned in any trials, and they're sitting there on top of power in Egypt, no one should even handshake with these people. And then when that happened, they have no choice. And I believe we'll never reach that, and I believe that my hunch is that they're already looking for an exit because of that legislation they're trying to pass. It shows that they're trying to get out, but they're trying to do it as in different ways. So there's a question about Muslim Brotherhood, yes. If you were there for 18 days with us in Tahrir Square, you will understand that the label Muslim Brotherhood completely changed, meaning the meaning of it. Young kids, in the bulk of Muslim Brotherhood really is youth. And we meet them, we know them, and we talk with them in Tahrir for 18 days, which was like a melting pot for a lot of young people together. Something happened that nobody is noticing, and I cannot reiterate that enough. Even the Muslim Brotherhood bulk of youth now, they're not anymore at all the Muslim Brotherhood that you would know or talk politically before. Maybe they have the same label, but they're not. Even when they now have a party, Hizb al-Adala wal-Harriya, even the party, when they started, they had a lot of talks, and there was a lot of young people who don't want to go there without a press conference of the Muslim Brotherhood leaders, whom now they're actually being criticized heavily inside because it's not democratic, that they don't want the president to be a woman, they don't want the president to be Christian Copt. And that is unheard of. That is not the Muslim Brotherhood that we heard about before. So although you might hear in the press or anywhere read about Muslim Brotherhood might get a big number of votes, even if that happened, they are not the same Muslim Brotherhood. Something happened on the ground that nobody is paying attention to. This melting pot that united Egypt changed dramatically how the youth, which is the bulk really of moving everything in Egypt now, is changing things. So the wealth and distribution of wealth, this is one of the major reasons the revolution happened, was adala ijtimaiya, social justice. Yes, I'm with you that people are looking for someone looking for a new Egypt with social justice, and it's due, of course, with all the corruption that was going on. And I don't agree with you that Egypt has limited resources. I believe that Egypt has a lot of resources, and mostly people. But it has a lot of resources. If the natural resources, natural resources, yeah, you're right. So, please. We have two more questions, and then we have to go, have a flight. Okay, all right, yes, okay, please, and then here.
I'm interested in your new project about
Tahrir, liberating liberation.
A little bit about it.
Sure. Well, it's basically what I just told you today. It starts on the 25th of Jan because of the premiere of Microphone and how that turned to be something else. And from there on, for 1 year, till 25th of Jan 2012, is part one, let's say. It's a documentary, and it might turn into a fiction, like Microphone. We started it as a documentary, we turned it into a fiction. But the main theme of the film is this essence that this is a revolution that belongs to humanity, that this is the basic reasons and slogans that people came out and asked for dignity was not about anything else but people demand that their dignity is back, that they have a say in the future of their country and their region. They have a stand against those who take the rights away from them and take it for granted. And that is basically the essence of Tahrir al-Tahrir, because the name Tahrir al-Tahrir started by liberating Liberation Square with a little protest, and then it grew to become the bigger meaning of liberating the meaning of liberation and what it's all about. Living in a country in Egypt with dictatorship for so long needs a lot of self-liberation as well. You do a lot of self-censorship, and you need to get all this out of your system. And I believe this is also part of my film. One of the reasons I'm here actually to get some feedback about that, and also to make sure that what I'm sensing is correct. That people all over the world will unite for such basic human rights. And I believe also one aspect of the film which is very, very important is that how fear that was ousted, how fear is definitely the engine politicians use to greenlight wars. The fear, the axis of evil, the fear that was created here so that you would greenlight war and invasion of Iraq. That fear, I believe, is the same fear Mubarak was using hijacking Egypt. And now the SCAF is using to make people afraid of secular and clashes between Copts and Muslims. It's all the same scenario. It's creating those fears so that people would greenlight vicious wars or vicious attacks on free speech and bloggers. Please. Okay, one last question.
My name is Ibrahim Hussein. I'm Egyptian American living here in Washington, D.C. I hate to disagree with you that the United States should do nothing. I think the United States should send from the President and Secretary of State a very strong message supporting the Egyptian people.
You're talking about the government?
The government.
Okay.
Yes, supporting the Egyptian people against the military. And another way to show a signal that they are siding with the people is the $1.3 billion military aid. This money could go and build bridges and hospitals and roads, and it would be a gift to the Egyptian people instead of the military. Another way that the administration can do is to do something about the debt. Egypt pays $350 million each year for just interest in the debt, without touching the debt. So my point is, there's a lot the U.S. can do and must do, and this is for the U.S. interest, not out of sympathy for Egypt alone. Egypt. Our interest is that the Egyptian revolution and the Tunisian revolution, all these revolutions succeed, because if they don't, the U.S. interest will suffer. I had another question.
That's right. Let me just quickly. I would say you're right. I made a distinction between the government and the people, and I maybe I didn't make it clear, but I would never give suggestions to the U.S. government. They have their own advisors. I think this city has enough think tanks to think for the whole world. So I think they have enough think tanks. But I was talking about the U.S. people. Just stay informed. Just stay tuned. And this is why I'm here.
But the U.S.
Thank you.
I think